For many of us, Nintendo Power was the gateway drug to harder video game magazines, with its eye-catching cover designs and an emphasis on detailed strategy guides. Nintendo Power towed the line between informative news source and wildly biased propaganda machine. No matter where you come down on this long-running magazine, it's interesting to look back at some of the misconceptions people have about Nintendo Power's early days. Here are 5 facts you didn't know about Nintendo Power. Nintendo Power reviews were not wildly biased. Every critic has to fight charges of bias. That just comes with the territory. But that charge is especially tricky when you're working for the world's largest video game maker. If you've always suspected that Nintendo Power was little more than a cheerleader for their games, then you're not alone. With a name like Nintendo Power, it's normal to expect every game to get a perfect score. But here's a fact: you're wrong. Let's take a look at the numbers. Between March of 1989 and December 1995, Nintendo Power reviewed a total of 1,503 games across 4 different platforms. The average score was 3.3 out of 5. Compare this to GamePro, which averaged a more generous 4.1 out of 5 in the same time period. Nintendo Power's 3.3 is in line with Electronic Gaming Monthly, and yet you rarely hear people complain about a Sushi X bias. And it's not like Nintendo Power's scores improved over the years. In fact, the exact opposite is true. Between 1989 and 1990, Nintendo Power averaged a score of 3.4. Over the next 3 years, the magazine plateaued at 3.3, and then starting in 1994, the average decreased a tick to 3.2. So there. Nintendo Power liked SimCity more than Super Mario World. By the summer of 1991, Nintendo Power couldn't contain their excitement for the brand new Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This 16-bit console came packaged with Super Mario World, one of the most anticipated sequels of all time. With all eyes on the Italian plumber, the entire world waited to hear if Mario's first 16-bit adventure was worth the 16-month wait. As expected, Super Mario World quickly won over critics, with Nintendo Power going as far as to give it a staggering 4.5. Up to that point, only a dozen games had scored a 4.5. Mario World was in an elite group that included The Adventures of Bayou Billy, Ninja Gaiden, Battletoads, and Super Mario Bros. 3. But here's the strange thing: this 2D platformer was not the highest scoring Super NES launch title. In a weird twist of fate, Nintendo Power gave SimCity a 4.6 out of 5, making it the magazine's top scoring launch game. The editors loved it, stressing how loaded with new great features it was. It had no trouble besting F-Zero, which scored a 4 out of 5, Pilot Wings with a 3.8 out of 5, and a 3.6 out of 5 for Gradius 3. It may not have been the system's best looking game, but SimCity was Nintendo Power's top pick at the Super NES launch. Nintendo Power's highest scoring game will surprise you. SimCity and Super Mario World made it look easy, but getting a score of 4.5 or higher was incredibly hard. How hard? Before 1996, only 19 games managed such a high score from Nintendo Power. Of this group, 11 games were on the Nintendo Entertainment System, 7 were on the Super NES, and only 1 was for the Game Boy, Kirby's Pinball Land. With more than 1,500 reviews, only 1.3% of the games scored at least a 4.5. This surprisingly low number is all the more shocking when you look at what games made the cut. Some of the games make sense, such as Ninja Gaiden, Battletoads, Shadowrun, Super Metroid, Final Fantasy II, Chrono Trigger, Batman the video game, and of course Super Mario Bros. 3. Many of these are undisputed classics, so nobody's gonna fault Nintendo Power's high score. But can the same be said about the Three Stooges, the Addams Family, and Stealth Eagle? Believe it or not, the Three Stooges was Nintendo Power's top-scoring game for a number of months, with an impressive 4.7 out of 5. This licensed action game was only surpassed by Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse and Zelda 3: A Link to the Past. Not even Super Metroid, Super Mario World, or SimCity could beat the Three Stooges. Speaking of which, it's interesting to see which games came just shy of that 4.5 score. Huge Nintendo releases like Super Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country, Mario Land, and Metroid 2: Return of Samus just missed the cut. The same was true about major third-party games like Super Star Wars, Super Castlevania 4, Street Fighter 2, and Maniac Mansion. Radio silence at the Game Boy launch. While Nintendo Power was quick to review the 5 Super NES launch games, the same cannot be said about the Game Boy in 1989. For the first year, the magazine decided to hold off on giving a proper score, and simply previewed games instead. This means that titles like Alleyway, Super Mario Land, and Tetris were never given number grades like games on other systems. I'm not sure why the sudden change, but Nintendo Power started reviewing Game Boy games in their November-December 1990 issue. More than a year late, the magazine reviewed 15 black and white carts, including Amazing Penguin, Battle Ball, Bubble Ghost, Dr. Mario, DuckTales, Ghostbusters 2, Ninja Boy, RoboCop, and Soccer Mania. It was an unimpressive lot, with only Dr. Mario scoring a 4. For what it's worth, the magazine did not make the same mistake with the Virtual Boy. Nintendo Power decided to review all 4 1995 launch games, averaging a middling 3.3. Space Shooter Red Alarm came out on top with a score of 3.5 out of 5. The rest of the list boiled down to Mario's Tennis with 3.4, Galactic Pinball with 3.3, and Telero Boxing with 3.2. Not exactly the most encouraging lineup of games. The final days of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Just how enduring was the Nintendo Entertainment System? It took Nintendo 6 years and 58 issues before going a month without a single NES review. 9 issues later, Nintendo Power ran their final review for the 8-bit stalwart, Wario's Woods. They gave it a 3.1 out of 5. For a system with so many amazing games, Nintendo's first console went out with a whimper. The sad truth is that Nintendo Power had already forgotten about the 8-bitter. Forget Wario's Woods in 1995. The last time Nintendo Power featured an NES game on the cover was October 1992, which was Felix the Cat and his brand new bag of tricks. With most developers turning their attention to the Super NES, the old school systems were only featured on a smattering of covers in the early 1990s. Still, you can't be too sad about the fate of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a system that managed to stay relevant for the better part of a decade, and Nintendo Power was there most of the way. It's fun to think back to a simpler time, when games didn't have DLC and nobody complained on Twitter. But while you sit there and reminisce about the good old days, remember that Nintendo Power gave the Three Stooges a higher score than Super Metroid. Make of that what you will.